All right, man. Good morning. How you doing today?
I'm doing okay. How are you?
Doing good. It's a pleasure. Definitely want to go and take this time to just get a few questions from you. Ask you
Mhm.
a question, and I thank you for just giving me that time. Just wanted to talk to you today about your platform and just really get to know the person that I see all the time on Instagram. Just tell me a little bit about yourself, where you from, and like what does success mean to you.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I know we've followed each other for a while. We've had, brief conversations, and I appreciate you for inviting me here. I'm Brittany Claybrooks. I am originally from Detroit, Michigan, born and raised. I live in New Jersey. I've lived here for almost a decade, and I have served since I've been here in the city council in East Orange, New Jersey, small suburb or urban suburb right outside of Newark. I've served in the planning departments. I'm an urban planner by trade, so I pretty much study the built environment and what it means to have a planned city. So a lot of developments that you see going up in cities across the United States that are revitalizing, those are the result of planning departments, and it's what we call a planning process. And so I've been involved in that work for some time now. And I am an all around public servant. So I took an interest in government when I was in college. I was going to school to be a doctor. I was a bio pre med major. And that was what my parents had set me up to do. And I had a change of heart after taking a government class and finding out that our condition as Black folks and in urban communities was done like not by accident. And so once I had that mind shift, I decided that I would go into public service, first starting out in healthcare, and now I'm here. I've run for Congress, I've done all the things, but most of my focus and purpose has been in fighting for our people, people who look like me, as well as making sure that we are having integrity in government. As you know, a lot of people don't feel like it works for them. And success for me just means that it's not what you're doing, it's how you're doing it. And for me, it just means being authentic and okay in the space. I don't think that the field that I'm in produces people who are oftentimes just okay, right? It's a lot of toxicity sometimes. There are a lot of great people, but there also is a thread of, we're still kind of living in a time where everything has to be cookie cutter and it's moving in an authentic direction, but people are growing apathetic. And one of the things that I've always measured with with regard to with regard to success is how am I doing it, and am I doing it in a way that's true to me? And that's something I want for everybody.
Oh, definitely. And one thing I just noticed about you, as far as just even doing my research before we even conducted the interview, is just like you're a silent mover. It's more so leading by example, and I admire that. Just even knowing, like you said, where you come from, your beginnings, and even how it even like measures up to your platform now, just caring about housing. And I know, as you know, as far as Detroit being like Motown, it has a lot of history there as far as just like the car industry and a lot of like Black people were thriving at that time as far as good jobs, good vehicle, good families, and all of a sudden just changes happen. And then it's like we go down and we digress as far as a community. So like what do
Mhm.
you see as far as being in Detroit and then just getting a chance and opportunity to go to the other side of the coast and just seeing two worlds? And how do you feel like that just measures up as far as who you are as a person and what you mean to your community?
Well, thank you for that. So, a couple things. Let me just lay out a little bit more background. Number one, I was a former foster youth. And, my parents spent some significant time in prison. My mom, God rest her soul, she passed in 2022. She was in and out of prison for some years, probably about like 12 years, like a 12-year stretch. And my father, both of them, one, my biological father spent quite a bit of time in prison. And then the father who I acknowledge and have acknowledged most of my life, who I love to death, spent about 14 years, like I did a 14-year stint and had spent a long time in and out prior to that. And so for me, you know, I have always understood what the real truth was about our communities from that lens and that perspective, like how the system really works and plays out in our communities, and how you know there's some people living one way in the suburbs, and then there's our cities that always experience things the worst. And when I moved, for me, it was the best thing to move for me to go to like Florida and then New York and New Jersey. But the funny thing is that people are experiencing the same things everywhere. Like I live in a place called East Orange, right? We have some suburban elements, but then there's Newark right next to us, who Detroit and Newark are twins.
That right.
Same. Twins. And the good thing is that you have leadership and people who are trying to figure it out. But the other part of that is, are we being honest about the way that we are doing things? And are we being honest about how we really want these cities to turn around? And are we holding people to the highest level of accountability? I know, like for me, I was just telling somebody on the panel last night, like I have never had, a mayor that did not look like me, and I've never had a council person that didn't look like me, and I never had a congressperson or state assembly person, at least one, that did not look like me. So it's honestly important to me that you ask the real questions, particularly in the housing crisis right now, where some people have apartments, some people don't, and it's like homelessness is rising. It's a real thing, and I think people feel like that's something that's like, oh, well, that's a them problem, or you did something wrong, or you ain't get it out the mud like I did, so you living in this condition. And it's a whole lot of that conversation going on social media about like how you can manifest stuff, and if you just manifest your way out of it. But the truth of the matter is, I'm in a field where we know that that's not true. So as I see different coasts and see the problem from all these different perspectives, the condition of our people honestly is one and the same everywhere. And I think that's something that people should realize. So whether you in the South, in the Midwest, or the Northeast, it may look different. The players may be different, the
Same
income,
game.
yeah, but it's the same game, same thing.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. And not to see that even like with our generation now, we was always taught the traditional path, you go to school, once you go to school, you graduate, you get you a good job, you live happy ever after. But the American dream, how they taught us in school, like what did that mean to you as far as in your childhood? Do you see that same American dream now as far as you
No,
going?
no, it's not the same. It is not the same. I mean, like, so number one, like I told you, our family, it's like you going to school to be a doctor because you got to make some money. Now, whether you like it or not, that ain't our concern. But you can't work at the plants because the car industry didn't crash, right? Because I graduated in '09. The
Right.
car industry has crashed. So that little plant plan you have, out the window. That's gone. And then now I have to go to college, and what have I been studying to do in school? What have I been good at? STEM, math, chemistry, all that. I'm going to school to be a doctor. I'm going to go be an OBGYN. After that, all my problems will be taken care of because I'll be making money. And then I'm going to have a big house and my family's going to live in it. I'll get us out the hood, the whole thing, or stay in the hood and have a nice house in the hood. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I think for me, it was just like, all right, now I'm in college. Now I switch my major to healthcare management because those people also make money and they help people. And then I get out and was like, okay, so the student loan debt is a thing. Like, hmm, all right, $100,000. That's a yearly salary. Got it.
Yeah.
Problem. And then now I want to go to grad school, scholarship. Great. Tuition's paid for, cost of living, student loans, right? So now you have more on top of that. And you're paying, you paying down your debt, you trying to fight for student loan debt cancellation, but the answer is always, well, it takes time because we got to figure out how that looks and what if the market can handle it and how are we going to pay people's debt. And first you got to have a public service job for 10 years and all this other stuff. And now I'm like, okay, I'm 30 something. Back in the day, by the time you was 30 something, you could own a house and have a family and do the whole thing. That's not the case now, right? Like even married couples, it used to be, well, we should get married because that's kind of how the American dream is. You get married, you have no. We're seeing people testify in front of our presumptive, our nominee, our Democratic nominee, that like, no, we're married and we're moving in with our cousins who are also married, so we can figure out how to pay the bills and make ends meet. So I don't think the American dream is the same, but I also don't think that's a bad thing because what it's challenging us to do is figure out a future and a way forward that works for us and our generation in the way that we want to move forward. And it's challenging, you know, some of the lies that we were told. And now we have to figure it out and be innovative. And I honestly don't think it's a bad thing, but I do think we have some work to do to make sure that everybody can participate in where it's going. Because where it's going, it's going away. But can my people participate in that? Are we ready for people from communities like mine, where I come from and where I live, to be a part of this new situation? I really think the answer is no.
I agree on that,
I
definitely.
don't think they're working on it. I don't think it'll be inclusive, but that's why we're fighting.
Well, definitely. And I feel like even with that, like you're saying, how we were just told something rather than just doing our own homework and thinking for ourselves as adults supposed to be grown into that. Just everybody got to stay own way as far as into, those walks of life. So like how do you feel like we can educate ourselves now? We know better, we do better, and we got to make sure that the next person doesn't have to fall short as far as what they desire in their American dream, their version of it. Because like you said, going to school might have been one person's American dream, the other is going to work, make money, pay bills, while the other one
Mhm.
is to move from a different country, come set up shop and give their family better life, generational wealth. It's just like, how can we really just take those lessons and use it to our best advantage as far as that experience? Like, what you think we need to do right now as far as just like frontlining that?
Well, with respect to community, like education and educating ourselves, I'm happy about technology and social media and like all these ways that people can obtain information, because it used to be something that if you had it, you had it. If you could afford it, you could afford it. Now, like, we if you on social media like I'm on social media, I'm loving hearing what people think about stuff. Like, comment sections are like real live data places where you can get data and see how people are thinking. And you have people that wouldn't otherwise hear or see talking about this stuff in our local communities, who will get up under the comment section on the shade room and be like, well, I feel like this and this and this and that and the third, whether their subject and verb and pronouns and all that stuff agree with each other, and whether they're writing in the African American vernacular or the most educated of us all. Social media and the internet is a place where we all can interact together and learn about stuff, which I appreciate. I know that that may not be the case for all public officials, because the more educated people are, the more accountable you have to be to those folks, and the more you have to prepare yourself. But I love it because being educated and having knowledge used to look a certain way. And now today's society is challenging it, like, are you smarter than me, or are you more qualified than me because you have this thing, right? Or what about me, who went to a trade school, who actually studied a thing, and that led me to want to do other things in my life because now I have disposable income after becoming an electrician. I love that we have a trade school where I live at, because now you have people going to school for HVAC systems and all of that stuff, and we have a focus in that. Or people are owning businesses from TikTok shops and Instagram boutiques and this and that and the third.
Over
So
time.
I personally am a participant and I love where we're going. It's just about making sure that our government and things are set up so that we can be comfortable in whatever we choose. That's the real American dream, right?
Right.
It's not having a specific set path that we celebrate. And because everyone has become influential in their own little world, whether it's 25 people that follow you, or 100 people that follow you, or 5,000, or a little over 10,000 like you have, like, it doesn't matter. Like, people are charting their own course. And I think we have some people in government who are scared of that. We have leaders who are scared of that. Some that look like us, a lot of them that don't. But I'm excited about it, and I want people to continue to do what they're doing. Continue to seek knowledge. If it pops up on your timeline, you have questions about it, do the other research, because everything is not true. Everything you see is not true. But I'm actually I'm really optimistic, honestly. Like, I know I'm not I know I should probably be more of a pessimist because I've been working in this for a while,
Yeah.
and I've seen some of the ugliest parts of it and some of the most corrupt parts of it, and I fought against people who I thought were corrupt. But that just comes from a place of trying to protect where we're going in our society and creating a better space for people like you and me to exist. Because to be honest, we getting up there. And now there are people behind us that are 18, 21. Those people are probably 10 years, 11 years younger than us. And so I think it's now our turn to kind of really start to make those changes. And so I would say start in your own little space, because I really believe that self-actualization, particularly for our people as individuals, is justice. And that's the type of justice we're not talking about a lot, because we're so communal, and you should be communal, and you should take responsibility for your community. But a part of that too is becoming the best version of yourself, the most healed version of yourself, taking time off, healing so that you can be a better person for your community. And I don't think that's talked about enough when it comes to our people. And I think we're starting to see a lot of it. But honestly, if you can wake up in the morning and be the best healed version of yourself, dealing with all the hard parts of life as a well individual, I honestly think that that's justice. And that has changed for me over the last 15 years. But the better I become, and the more informed, and the better care that I get, the more I'm like, I just want people to be well. Like, it's a whole group of our community that needs to heal, and like, we need to be okay. So the reason why I'm fighting government now is, do those people have access to healthcare and mental health services to be okay? Can they go to a job so that they're okay? Are they housed so that they are okay? It's not just about it's the right thing to do. We just want people to be all right.
Nah, for
You
sure.
know, and I think that's the biggest version of success, when somebody can be like, "Oh, I'm okay," and mean it and not be lying about it.
No, for real. And then also, like I say, don't focus on things you can't control. So, like, even looking at the top of where you can't even see the top of the mountain, starting right there at that first step, like, to others who don't have, I guess, that will or that experience, though, where should they start as far as building on that first step? And like you said, that's just in your community. Like, what would you say to the common person who just wants to fight but just don't know how to explain it, or just even voice their opinion or voice their platform? Where
Yeah, I get that. I get that. I understand it 100%. So how I got my start was, I literally walked into a workshop that was happening at a church by my school when I was an undergrad, and it was talking about foster care and how, where do we go from here, and former foster youth and juvenile justice and all this stuff. And I walked in there, I wasn't dressed properly. I had on like a t-shirt with a transformer thing. I remember exactly what I had on, some jeans and some flip-flops, and I wanted to go. I went because I wanted to know who was talking about this, and did they have people who had actually experienced it? Because growing up, most of the time, your social workers and people who were taking care of your case were people who, like, oh, they felt sorry for you, but they didn't really understand you. Like, they didn't, you felt like a number to them, right? You had some caring ones here or there, but for the most part, it was like, girl, you don't understand me. You got this nice job or whatever. Now that I'm grown, I know it's not that nice. But back then it was like, you don't understand me. So how can we be at the table and have something to say about our condition? So I went, and that's where I met people who were like, hold on, like, that turned into a job at the Florida Department of Juvenile Justice. And that's why I say companies, programs need to open up spaces for people with lived experience, because everyday people do want to know about this. Like, if you look up and down social media and you keep up with this and go to the profiles of some of the people who have a lot to say, they regular people. And I think that, it's easier now. It is a lot easier. As hard as it is, it's also easier for folks to get in and like get their foot in, because all it takes is for you to have a camera and a phone and be like, look, this is how I feel. Right? I think we do need to do better about making sure that people know about what's going on. So a lot of times our meetings end up being very empty, right? So you can be having a whole meeting about something and all of that, and it's empty, like people aren't there.
And why is that though? Why do you feel like that is? Like I say, all the
I
people
think
that
that
has
that's
like,
I think that that's because people really don't feel like the government or their leaders are really working for them. And what I always tell leaders is that, what I always tell my peers, right? I would call them my peers, is that, like, those people, when they vote for you or when they appoint you or when they pay their tax dollars to whatever program you're working in, or the government, they've done their part, to be honest. Like, so while they're working every day, it is your job to work on their behalf and represent them. So that means if there's no one there, you still are responsible for doing what is the right thing, whether somebody's looking or not. Because if you are leading in a working class community or in a Black community that's urban, where people are at the poverty line. Respectfully, time is not an unlimited resource for people who have to work every day. So if the deal comes to your table, there may not be anybody there with you, but you should always be keeping in mind, what does this mean for the people that I asked to represent? They didn't ask you to come represent them. You chose to stand up there and say you was gonna do X, Y, and Z. So your track record ought to reflect that, and your office, your meetings, your space should always be a place where people feel like they can go. And I think governments are trying to get there, because between the protests in 2020, COVID, the fact that people can't afford to live somewhere, we're seeing increased participation. Social media, folks are trying to connect with folks on social media better. Whole campaigns are won and fought digitally now, like people not on the ground the way they used to be. I think that there's still some value in that. But I think if you're a regular everyday person, whatever you have interest in, it's open to you and it's available to you. And I think that you ought to go for it. Try. I think there's a lot to be said about mental health and people's ability to try, right? I think everybody has varying abilities to try, which is why investment in those services are important in a way that people can digest, in a way that people can have access to it, right? Like if I'm hearing about therapy and I'm reading about therapy, and there's always everybody posting these memes about healing and manifesting and all of that. And I look around my community and there's nowhere to go to even start that process. And I got to drive to the suburbs to get there, or the person that's running the program don't look like me, or I don't know where to find people who look like me so I can talk about my situation. Those are all interesting. Those are all interesting circumstances to be in, and they're real. And that's why I chose to be in government, so that you can continue to provide spaces for people to be okay, whether they want it or not, whether they want it today or tomorrow or next month or next year. You still need to have the things in place so that they can access it when the time is right for them, when they have to come in contact with it. Because to be honest, this whole public service thing or needing public service things is not no longer the welfare queen situation. Now after COVID, a lot of us are like 2 and 3 steps away from
From
having to have those things ourselves. Like, you see memes all the time, like, I just want somebody food stamp card. That's a real, and it's coming from people who are like working every day. I'm like, look, how you want to find a way to my heart, find me a food stamp card. Help me apply for benefit. That's a real movement. People really feel like that.
yeah.
And those are not people who we automatically assume it looks like. So that's why this stuff is important. Because you have the least of these. My religion call us the least of these. You have to do what's best for the least of us. Start there. And then once you start there, you can solve everybody else's problems if you just start with people who are experiencing it the worst. Because if you can solve their problems, the hardest problems, I guarantee you gonna Malcolm, you're gonna be able to go somewhere and get what you need. I'll be able to go somewhere and get what I need, because we're solving it for people who actually need it. So those of us who need it at some point, or find ourselves needing it at some point, will have somewhere to go.
So, all right. So, with like education, do you feel like that education is important though? The way they try to just say it's not necessary. Do you feel like that's like the first step in the building block as far as to get to where we're trying to go?
Yeah, I absolutely think education is important. This is how I feel. And I think there's another side of politics that are saying government isn't important, education is important. Let's get rid of the school system and all this other stuff. Government is too much in our business. The Project 2025 people, or whatever that is. I I think education is important. I don't think college is for everybody, but I think education is for everybody. And that's why there's such an attack on what we read, what we have access to, where we can get our information from online. You know what I mean? I think there's an attack on that, because the more educated people become and the more easier it is to access information, the more accountable some of the deepest, darkest parts of our power structure have to be. And that's a problem, right? I mean, think about back in the day. This is not new. It just looks different, right? Back in the day, if a Black person could read, that was an issue for them. Why? Because once that person comes into knowledge and comes into this awareness, now you have a person who has questions. And when I start asking questions, now I'm learning more. And I learned that, wait, I'm a human being. I'm actually not property. I'm a human being. Then it moves on to, wait, I can vote? I have a say? Now we have whole campaigns that are geared towards figuring out what Black people want to hear. Oh, wait a minute. Now people have access to the internet for real, on their devices. So now they can look up my voting record and what I've done over time. Hold on now. You know, wait a minute. Like AI exists. So now everybody can write a letter, whether or not they can read on the level or not, they can type in something and it calculates what they want to say. Oh my God, these people are coming for us. And that may not be a bad thing for us, but it is a bad thing for people who don't have the best intentions for our people and for, folks who look like us and folks in our communities. It's good for us. It is not good for them. Because the more educated we are, the more together we are, the more organized we are around things that matter to us, and the more we show our diversity, the power structure that's coming down slowly but surely. And it's coming down faster than they anticipated and that they were ready for. That's why they're attacking it so much. Because education is important. And I love hearing what my nephew has to say, who barely leaves Detroit. Barely leaves Detroit, but he knows about Dubai. He knows about the caste system. He knows about whatever it is just because he has access to a phone. And so now the way I grew up, having to actually leave and go see it for myself, he has an imagination beyond belief. He believes that he deserves luxury items one day. Not because it exists around him, but because he has access to seeing what that looks like. He's not limited to just Detroit, you know? He's like, oh, I mean, one day I could build a robot. Well, how you know that? Well, I was on YouTube and like I was watching them use the materials to build a robot. Do you know how people were like, what it who used to be comfortable talking about they wanted to do robotics in our neighborhood growing up? That was not a that you mean there's a coding program in our communities for kids? That's a problem for our power structure who don't look like us and right here. That's an issue for them.
Yeah, definitely. So do you feel like there's like room, like as far as for integrity in politics? Because a lot of time people don't even want to make those decisions because like I can't even trust this person. I cannot trust this person. Like you say, you done seen the worst of it, you seen the best of it probably. So to even know, just finding your confidence as far as in your industry, do you feel like the same person can be granted that if they actually believe in the process and just like you say embrace it?
I
Right.
think so. I think so. I live for the day where somebody who looks like me, who is a result of like everything wrong with the system, can run for president. With a name like Daquan Johnson, who had it rough in life because of the way our system's set up, who's saying like, yo, like I'm not a part of the elite squad, but I made it here. I think right now we're getting there, right? We're laying the foundation for that, right? Like the fact that I was able to even make it as far as I have, right? Like foster youth on a whole aren't very small percentage of us are making it out of our neighborhood. And then the percentage of us that are going to college and grad school and all that, it's even smaller. And so even I might find myself sometimes in spaces up at what we call the top, some of those brunches and lunches and exclusive spaces. And the whole room might look like me, but barely anybody there may have my lived experience. And that's why I feel like lived experience and seeing people who not just look like you, but have your lived experience is important. Because that's what it's really coming down to now. Because we've seen like generations, a couple generations of Black leadership now. But now it's like, well, what does that mean for me if I did a little bit of time? And if I could vote with a record, then maybe I might be able to advocate on a city council with a record. And maybe, if I got caught with a little bit of something at a time and period, maybe my record could be expunged so that I could like serve, right? Like I learned a couple things. I started my career in prison, right? I got my GED and then I went to college and now I'm studying and now I'm out and I have a business or I'm doing this and that and the third. I think I could be trusted. Like I could be trusted with this. Matter of fact, I could be trusted more with it than most people because at least I'm not hiding it. I'm not trying to shifted under the rug to look politically okay. Y'all already know what's going on with me. So, I've learned from that. Now I want to help people from these communities. I think I can start now that I have a nonprofit that mentors young Black boys and keeps them out the streets, and I'm a former gang member. Maybe I think I could run for city council or mayor or, all of that stuff. And that comes from me being expelled from the Michigan public school system and having to go to school at night and day on a notarized contract that I couldn't get in no more altercations or anything like that.
That's a true story, though.
Yeah, like that's a real true story. And like now I'm graduating second in my class, and okay, maybe I can't play a sport for real or any of that, but my up here, like this is gonna be my escape out of this. And I disguised it and I moved around and I got my education, did whatever, and now I'm in a room and I'm like, yeah, wrong Black person. If you're not really for us, I'm the wrong person to be talking to. Why? Because that's my lived experience. And I think a lot of times people discount the qualifications of what it means to actually live through a thing. And I love that our Miss Harris, I love the fact that she's talking about, well, my family, my parents didn't stay together. I'm okay. I mean, it doesn't look cookie cutter, right? Like, okay, I have stepchildren. Okay, that's a lot of people in America, right? Okay, I was expelled from the public school system. There are laws in place, zero tolerance laws and school to prison pipeline that existed too, that did not see me as a troubled child dealing with my environment and the fact that my mom's in prison and I may have gotten a letter from her last night. Now I miss her. Now I want to fight. Like, it's a lot. And now look at me. Like, this is the place where people can have that. And I think what we're just trying to do is hold our government accountable for continuing to create the space that its law says that should exist for us. We didn't write the Constitution, they did. Just trying to keep you accountable to it.
No, for sure. So that's like we accountable. I know November, this would be Judgment Day. So what do you feel like young voters need to know as far as like how to go out there and just hit the ground running in these next like 30, 40 days away?
or not even, because early voting starts for us like I think the 24th.
No,
So
true.
that week. So
Yeah.
you start voting as early as like October, right? The week before, maybe a week and a half before. So I would say participate because our lives depend on it. And I know people say that all the time, but it's a real thing now. And I understand like why people are tired. If you live in an environment like I grew up in and you go from everything's abandoned to the next thing you know, everything's fixed up and you can't afford it, and it happened without you even like you look up one day and be like, dang, is this for me? Like, are they rebuilding this for me? Like, what about us? What happened? Like, are we being forgotten? Those are reasons to vote, right? And that doesn't, Miss Harris, Vice President Harris, she's up there at the top. She's going to work on the high level issues that affect us across the country. But like your local school board person, they are deciding what happens with the money in your school district. Your mayor, they're the person saying yes or no to those deals that created the new downtown that you have, that have apartments that you can't afford to live in. Your council people, those are the people who decide, where you can park, when trash get picked up, when does trash get picked up, how are resources allocated, right? I watched a video of a public servant say to a library, like, I'm sorry, but you should be raising some money, right? And I'm like, wait a minute, but we have a literacy problem. So if as long as the library is a place that is funded in the city budget, we have a responsibility to put resources where they belong to really address the issues. Those people are local. They don't live in the White House. They literally, by law, have to live in your area in order to be in those positions. Those people live in your neighborhood and they're making decisions for you. I would say start there. And I don't think people see it that way because they're in their everyday lives. They're moving and they're grooving. And our voting base has to get younger in order for laws that we have to get more participation from younger people in order for people to see that, like, no, this is important. Now, I believe you should be working on behalf of people, whether they vote for you or not, but representation really is important. So if you are under 40 and you have issues and you are registered to vote, you have the right to voice those things even before you vote. Because in some places like Newark, you can vote at 16 in some cases. So I think people should turn out, and I think it does matter. And we've seen it with Obama, we've seen it with Trump, and how our lack of turnout, or they're turning out more than we did, right? But I think that our silence is also saying something too. Like your most reliable voting base, we're not happy. We don't like it. We are not excited at all. But I would say just give it one more try. Give it one more shot. We have another shot at this, and the alternative to our silence, like the alternative and the result of our silence, is going to be very detrimental, and we're seeing it. I hope.
Absolutely. So what's in store for you for the remainder of the year, like 2024, and what could we expect for 2025?
Um, I'm still praying about it. I am still praying about what's next. I think we live in a society that is always talking about what's next, and we forget to be in the moment. And one of the things that I have always took pride in is the fact that I give 100% to where I am until God tells me different. And that's the reason why I feel like being a quality leader is important, being a quality servant is important, being a well-rounded whole person is important, because life goes in ebbs and flows. And I think society now lives in like the big moments. And then we rarely know what to do in those like, those like low frequency moments. And I'm just taking the time to be better, right? It does take a lot out of you to run for office and serve people, and, publicly lose your mom, both of my moms, and publicly have to explain myself and my reasons why all the time. And I love how there's freedom now in being a healed person in public service, because we're seeing what happens when people aren't healed. They're being taken to prison and taken into custody right now.
Right, right.
Because, this environment can breed very abusive folks when they aren't taking the time to be healed, and they're sucked into the power and the culture and all of that. Shout out to one of our childhood moguls, you know.
Exactly. So
But like that's an example of why it's important for people to be okay in doing this work, because when you're not, it will catch up to you. And I've always prided myself, as you know, I'm outside sometimes, and I'm 100% outside, and I'm 100% a public servant, and I'm 100% a government employee, and I'm 100% of all the things, because I think that's how you get better whole people. And I think the time is gone where you got to feel the pressure to figure out what's next. Now, do I still feel a responsibility to serve publicly? Yes. So will you likely see me somewhere publicly saying, this is what I want to do, this is how I want to serve publicly in the next year? Probably, maybe. But does that mean that it's a guarantee? I don't know. I don't know, because I'm going with wherever God is taking me, right? That's why I'll stay on panels. I'll keep educating folks. I'll keep doing what I have to do, because I believe that's what God called me to do on this earth. But I don't know how that looks, honestly. I have a job. I work in urban planning. We're doing downtown revitalization and retail studies and all of that, which is public service too. But I really don't know. And I want more people to feel comfortable saying, I don't know. Like I want people to feel more comfortable when they talk to folks. You're like, I don't know. I don't have that figured out yet. But I'll still continue to serve in some capacity. I just don't know how it will look. I'm nervous, right? Because our society has a real bad relationship with loss. There's this idea that if you're unsuccessful at something, we're starting to see more people share stories of unsuccess, or times they weren't successful, and it's becoming more accepted. But I think that's like more modern than it used to be. We used to try to cover that kind of stuff up and be okay and all. Everybody's functioning. Right now, that's not the case. Like you have to explain to people now who you truly are. And COVID showed us that we were all ugly on the Zoom with no makeup and no access to haircuts and hair and all of that. So I'm enjoying being a public servant in my generation, in my time, where I could just be like, I don't know. We'll figure it out. I love that. I want more people to feel justice, the justice that comes with that and behind it.
I definitely appreciate you for your time, Brittany, and I wish you for the best in your future endeavors.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And no problem. Best of luck at